So we started talking about word problems using parabolas in 4.6 with that last problem we did. And then we're going to do more of it here in 4.7. Some things I want to bring your attention to is, notice you have H and T, okay, which will also be, so which one's your X, which one's going to be your Y?
H is Y, T is X.
You guys are so smart. Another thing I want you guys to realize, okay, is that this one's not in descending order. On the Unit 4 test, students make the most mistakes by like making 80 their A value. But your A value is not 80. What is your A value? So my suggestion is, when you get a problem like this, rewrite it with X and Y and write it in descending order. So I'm going to rewrite this problem right now as Y equals negative 16x squared plus 80x. Also, I would go through and kind of try to figure out what they're asking for or which value you're going to find to get these answers. Okay, so let's read the question. Jason is standing on the ground and throws a ball vertically upward with an initial speed of 80 feet per second. Its height after t seconds is given. So H is dealing with height and T is dealing with seconds, right? So here it says, how high does the ball go? Oh my goodness, how high does the ball go? Which value is it going to be? The Y of the vertex. Okay? For B, how many seconds does it take to reach the maximum height? How many seconds does it take to reach the maximum height? Do you think that, what's that value going to be? The X of the vertex. Now this is one that's a little bit new, but it says, when does the ball hit the ground? So when you have parabolas, and this time our parabola, so this person is standing over here. There he is, very happy. He needs a smiley face. Okay, and he has a, okay, there you go. He has a ball, and he throws the ball up. Well, most of you know that what goes up must come down, right? So there is going to be a maximum height, which is your vertex where it hits, and that's how we get our X and Y value, but there's going to be a point where it hits back down to the ground. Do we all agree with that? How do you think you're going to find that value? What is it? I think you were saying the right thing. How do we find when the parabola hits the x-axis? How do we find those values? Your x-intercepts. You have to, starts with an F. Factor. And set your factors equal to 0. So we're just going to write right here, factor. Okay. So let's go ahead and begin and find our values. So we have to find the X before we find the Y, correct? How do I find the X value of the vertex? Very good. Negative B over 2A. So in this case, it's going to be negative 80 over 2 times negative 16. So we get negative 80 over negative 32, which reduces, what can go into both of those? 8 and 4. But, okay, let's start with 8, and we'd get 10 over, or not 8, okay, anyways. 10 over 4, and then we can reduce by 2, and we get 5 over 2. And 2 negatives make a positive. Now, 5 over 2 seconds doesn't really make any sense to me. Exactly, 2.5 seconds. And that's my answer for what? 2 goes into 5 2 times with 1 left over. Okay, and write that as 2.5, no, that's not C, it's B. 2.5 seconds. Make sure you put your units of what you're finding. Okay? So that's the X value of the vertex. We found that it takes the ball 2.5 seconds to reach the maximum height. Okay, so far so good? All right. So then, how do we find the y value? Plug it in. But which number is easiest to plug in? The 5/2. Okay, so we go to our equation. So we're finding the y equals, and we have negative 16 times 5/2 squared plus 80 times 5/2. So what is 5/2 squared? So I have negative 16 times 25/4 plus could we just reduce that? 2 goes into 80 how many times? 40, and we have 40 times 5, which is 200. Also, if you go back here, could I reduce those? Yeah, so 4 goes into 16, and that's negative 4, right? And negative 4 times 25 is? So I have negative 100 plus 200 equals positive 100. So on A, how high does the ball go? It is dealing with feet. So that answer is 100 feet. Now, lastly, when does the ball hit the ground? We need to factor. Or do you want to know the easier way? But it doesn't always work. So, you have to listen, do both, or do the way that will always work no matter what.
Always works no matter
Why do we get the X for A? Say that again. We answered your question somehow? Okay, so it will always work if you factor. So if I'm factoring here, and we have negative 16x squared plus 80x, what could I factor out? I can take out an 8, right? I can take out 16. And I'm going to take out a 16x. Okay, and actually I'm going to take out a negative 16, okay? So we're going to take out negative 16x, and that means I'm left with x what? Good, x minus 5. Because you always want that to end up being positive, okay? So that's why I took out a negative 16, so I don't have a negative there. And then there's nothing else to factor, so I just set it equal to 0. Well, when you set negative 16x equal to 0, what do you get? 0. And when I set x minus 5 equals 0, I get a 5. Well, doesn't this make sense? So the first time it's hitting the x-axis is at 0, right? Because he hasn't thrown it yet. And then he throws it, it takes 2.5 seconds to get here, and then it takes another 2.5 seconds, which makes 5 seconds to hit the ground. So this answer is 5 seconds. So this is where there's like a shortcut and the long way. So the long way was to factor. The shortcut is what? Doing this twice, because if it takes 2.5 seconds to go up, it's going to take... Can anyone think of a time when maybe this wouldn't work?
If it hits a tree.
Okay, if it hits an airplane. Good. A tree, okay. No.
The dinosaurs come back.
Okay, so some of you are not thinking along the lines I want to. Are you always throwing balls from the ground? Yes, you win. Okay, Julia is correct. So sometimes you could be, maybe you're standing on top of your house, I don't know, or doing something else. But you could throw something when you're above ground, right? And so that is the time that it will not, you can't double it because you're not starting at 0. You're starting up higher, and it's going to end up taking longer to hit the ground because, does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay, well, we're going to do some examples with that here in a minute. All right, so moving, any questions on example 1? Okay, example 2. An arrow is shot vertically upward with an initial speed of 96 feet per second. Its height after t seconds is given by this formula. So all of this stuff isn't really giving us a ton of information. Our main information is coming from the equation, which they give to us, which is really nice. Once you have that equation, what is probably the best thing you should do? Rewrite it, and you want to use maybe x's and y's and write it in descending order. So this one is going to change to be y equals you guys are amazing. Okay, so now it says how high does the arrow go? I always just like to give myself instructions so I write the correct numbers where I need to. So I know high is dealing with what? X or Y? Y. And then how long until the arrow reaches its maximum height? That's going to be your X. And then this last one I'm going to need to factor or double depending on what's going. Did it start at the ground? Well, that is true, but we're really, the person is standing on the ground. Unless they say they're at a building or on a building, then you know they're on the ground, okay? So this one I could end up just double it. But if you always want to factor, you will always get the correct answer. So if you don't even want to have to think about it, just always factor, and you'll get the correct answer as long as you know how to factor. Okay, so how do I find the x value of the vertex? You know what? I'm just going to go, yes, x equals negative b over 2a, and I'm going to let you guys finish this on your own. When you get your answers, raise your hands, and I will come and check them. Okay, so your answers should have been 144, 3, and 6. Okay, and it should be 144 what? Feet. And this was 3 seconds. And this ended up being 6 seconds. So when you go through, I'm just going to do this kind of quickly for those of you that didn't get it. Negative b would be negative 96 over 2 times negative 16. Negative 96 over negative 32 reduces to 3. We take 3, plug it in here. So we're going to have y equals negative 16 times 3 squared plus 96 times 3. 3 squared is 9. Negative 16 times 9 is negative 144. Plus 96 times 3 is 288. And when you subtract those, you get 144. This one, since it went from the ground, we can just double it, and 3 times 2 makes 6 seconds. If you factored it, you would have got the same answer. So if it takes 3 seconds to go up, it's going to take another 3 seconds to go down. you get 0 and positive 6, right? So if you factored it, you would have taken out negative 16x, right? And then you get x minus 6. When you set those equal to 0, you get 0 and positive 6. Okay? All right, any questions there on example 2? Okay, example 3 is slightly different. I know, isn't that nice? It sometimes happens. But notice, do you guys notice the difference between this equation and the other equations? It has a C. What do you think that C value is representing? How high they start. You are amazing, Sydney. Okay, so that is correct. So on this one, if we notice, whenever there's a C value, it is starting at that 64 feet. When it doesn't have the C value, it's starting at 0. Okay? So, do you think you guys can do this one completely on your own? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Try it on your own. If you need help, raise your hand and I can come around and help you.
Start by finding the x side of the vertex. Negative b over 2a. You can start with with the 1, this one is your Does it? Yep. Right. Take out a negative 8. Factor out a negative 8. Don't forget to always check for GCS when you're factoring. Right, so they're starting in with this much to get out of there. So, because the buffer is moving out. So it's going to go that far and it's up to 72. But then it takes, which would make sense. It took you 1 second to get the height, and then you're going to get down. It took three times the amount of time to get all. Perfect, good job. Okay, I'm going to start going through this. So the answers, if I didn't get around to check you, A is 72, B is 1 second, and C is 4 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to go, this is in the correct order, but I might go ahead and rewrite it as y equals negative 8x squared plus 16x plus 64. So how high? I'm going to find which value? The y. How long does it take? X. And this one I'm going to have to factor. Okay, so to find the x value of the vertex, x equals negative b over 2a
In this case, negative b is negative 16 over 2 times negative 8. So we get negative 16 over negative 16, which is 1. So my answer for E is, or sorry, A, B, and C. B is 1 second. Okay, we find the y by plugging back into our original equation. So we have y equals negative 8 times 1 squared plus 16 times 1 plus 64. 1 squared is 1. Negative 8 times 1 is negative 8 plus 16 plus 64. Negative 8 and 16 is 8. 8 plus 64 equals 72. And that is 72 what? Feet. Okay? So then we have to factor on this one because it's starting at a distance. It's starting from a balcony. Okay? So when you're factoring this, always take out your GCF first. In this case, I can take out a negative 8. So I get x squared. 16 divided by negative 8 would make what? Negative 2 plus, and 16 divided, or 64 divided by negative 8 is? Yeah, it's that, sorry. And then it's negative 8, right? Okay. So then we factor here further what multiplies to be a negative 8 and adds to be negative 2. Good. So x minus 4 and x plus 2, and when we set those equal to 0, we get x equals 4 and negative 2. Well, if you think about this, first of all, the negative one's not going to work because you can't have negative time. Okay? So this answer is 4 seconds. But what this means by the negative 2 is that it's almost like it's going negative 2 in reverse when you're going the balcony because it's starting you at a position. Do you get what I mean? So on this one, when you have a balcony, so here you are on this balcony, okay? And so you're throwing this, right? You're shooting this and it's going up and down. So really, this would have started at a negative amount because of the balcony. This is your building. This is the balcony. Here's a chair you're sitting on. Okay. Yes. No, that's not what I was drawing. It was just a person standing on a balcony. All right. So, does this all make sense to you as to why it's working? Yes? Okay. All right.